A grieving boy is isolated and threatened by his stepmother right after losing his mother. But a humble cleaning woman breaks the rules and offers affection where there was only silence. The bond between them blossoms until it is destroyed by a cruel scheme that leads her to trial. When everything seems lost, the love she planted proves stronger than any lie. In the imposing colonial mansion of Newport, Rhode Island, where the scent of hydrangea gardens mingled with the fresh air of the New England coast, Luke Richmond watched the fine rain from his bedroom window. His eyes, so much like his mother's, reflected the grey sky that covered the historic coastal city. At 8 years old, the boy carried on his small shoulders the weight of his mother's absence and the frustration of a body that did not fully obey his commands. The partial paralysis in his legs, a consequence of an accident in early childhood, had grown heavier since Mrs. Helen passed away 6 months ago. Gus Richmond, a successful entrepreneur in the technology sector, had plunged into work as a strategy to cope with his grief. Owner of one of the country's largest software companies, he remained absent even when physically present, leaving a void that Vanessa Campbell, his fiancée, seemed eager to fill, not with affection but with authority. "Close that curtain. Luke, I've told you this room needs to be dark for you to rest," Vanessa ordered, entering the room without knocking. Her high heels echoed on the hardwood floor, always announcing her intimidating presence. "But I want to see the rain." "Aunt Vanessa," the boy murmured without taking his eyes off the landscape. "I'm not your aunt. Soon I'll be your mother, and mothers need to be obeyed," she replied, pulling the velvet curtains with a brusque movement. "And no crying, do you hear? If you start that, you'll go without dinner again." Luke swallowed the lump forming in his throat. Since Vanessa had moved into the historic Richmond family estate, silence had become his best companion. Physical therapy sessions were reduced, friends stopped visiting, and games in the garden turned into distant memories. The next morning, the sky still held the same grayish hue when Julianne Sanders climbed the steep hill that led to the upscale neighborhood. The Richmond estate, with its neoclassical walls and well-tended gardens, contrasted with the simplicity of the 27-year-old who carried in her worn bag her only pair of extra shoes for work. Dressed in simple jeans and a white blouse, Julianne had been recommended by a friend for a cleaning position at that residence. "You're 5 minutes late," was the first sentence Vanessa addressed to her, after only partially opening the ornate iron gate. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "The bus was delayed because of the rain," Julianne explained, feeling the fine drops wet her curly hair. "Punctuality is essential here," Vanessa retorted, scrutinizing her from head to toe. "The rules are simple. You clean, you organize, and you leave. You don't talk to Mr. Richmond. You don't touch anything not necessary for your work. And most importantly, you don't go near the boy." "Understood?" Julianne nodded, feeling the weight of those words. She desperately needed that job. Her mother, Mrs. Susan, depended on expensive medications for a heart condition, and the little she earned from cleaning jobs was not enough to cover all expenses. The interior of the mansion was as imposing as its facade. Crystal chandeliers, antique restored furniture, and artworks filled the perfectly decorated rooms. However, even amidst such luxury, Julianne noticed a disturbing silence, as if those walls held painful secrets. "Start downstairs. The supplies are in the utility room closet," Vanessa instructed, before going upstairs to the upper floor. "I'll be in my office. If you need anything, ask Marlene in the kitchen." During the morning, Julianne dedicated herself to the designated rooms, always attentive to the slightest sound. Around 11 o'clock, while cleaning one of the second-floor corridors, she heard a muffled sound coming from one of the bedrooms. She approached cautiously and identified what sounded like suppressed crying. "Is anyone there?" she asked in a low voice, lightly touching the ajar door. There was no answer, only silence. Julianne hesitated for a few moments, torn between curiosity and the imposed rules. She decided to continue her work, but the crying returned, now more audible. "Are you okay?" she insisted, opening the door a little wider. That's when she saw Luke sitting in a wheelchair near the window, trying uselessly to hold back the tears streaming down his pale face. Noticing the cleaner's presence, the boy quickly wiped his face with his shirt sleeves. "You can't come in here," he whispered, looking frightened at the door. "She'll be mad." Julianne knew she was breaking the rules, But something in those sad eyes prevented her from backing down. She entered the room, closing the door softly behind her. "My name is Julianne," she introduced herself, kneeling to be at his eye level. "And you must be Luke, right?" The boy nodded shyly, still suspicious. "You're crying. Did something happen?" she asked with genuine concern. "I'm hungry," he confessed in a low voice. "I didn't have dinner last night, and she said I'd only get lunch if I stayed quiet." Julianne felt a pang in her chest. "How long have you not eaten properly?" "I don't know." "Many days," he replied, looking at his own hands. "Sometimes Marlene hides food from me, but today she had to leave." The young cleaner immediately remembered the lunch she had brought. It wasn't much, just rice, beans, a piece of chicken and salad, but it would be enough to feed the little boy. "I have an idea," she said, smiling. "How about we make a deal? I share my lunch with you, and in return you tell me your favorite cartoon. Sound good?" The boy's eyes lit up for the first time. "You won't tell her?" "It'll be our secret," Julianne assured him, making a gesture as if zipping her lips. "Wait here, I'll get my bag." When she returned with her lunchbox, she found Luke trying to adjust himself better in the chair. Without asking questions, Julianne helped him get more comfortable and put some food on a napkin. "Slowly, okay? You haven't eaten properly in a while," she advised, watching the boy take the first bite. It was at that exact moment that the door opened. Julianne froze, expecting to meet Vanessa's furious gaze, but who appeared was Gus Richmond. The entrepreneur, dressed in an impeccable suit, seemed equally surprised by the scene. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice firm but not threatening. "Dad," Luke exclaimed, with an animation that seemed long forgotten. "This is Julianne. She's sharing her lunch with me." Gus looked at his son, noticing something he hadn't seen in months, a small smile. His eyes met Julianne's, who quickly stood up. "I'm sorry, sir. I know I shouldn't be here, but—" she began. "How long has my son not eaten properly?" Gus interrupted, approaching Luke and touching his face. "He said it's been days," Julianne replied sincerely. "I just wanted to help." Gus was silent for a few moments, watching his son eat with such eagerness. An expression of guilt crossed his face, followed by a sudden decision. "What's your full name?" he asked the cleaner. "Julianne Sanders, sir." "Well, Julianne Sanders, from today on you are no longer just a cleaner in this house," he declared with a determined look. "I want to hire you as my son's caregiver as well." In the weeks that followed, the Richmond mansion witnessed a subtle yet profound transformation. Julianne arrived every morning at 7 o'clock sharp, bringing with her not only the energy of someone accustomed to hard work, but also stories, smiles, and infinite patience with Luke. The boy's room, once a space of isolation, began to gain colors with drawings he produced himself. Now that his hands found purpose again, Vanessa observed this change with an artificial smile on her lips and growing fury in her heart. Julianne's hiring as a caregiver had been a unilateral decision by Gus, and she had made sure to show her displeasure in every possible way. "I don't understand why we need an unqualified person to take care of Luke," she commented during dinner while the boy was in his room. "She doesn't even have nursing training." "My son smiled for the first time in months thanks to her," Gus replied, placing his napkin on the table. "And you know very well that Luke doesn't need medical care, just attention and encouragement to continue physical therapy. Still, this girl has no references, we know nothing about her," Vanessa insisted, adjusting her pearl necklace. "You should at least do a more detailed background check on her." What Vanessa didn't expect was that Gus had already done exactly that. Discreetly, he discovered that Julianne was the only daughter of Mrs. Susan Sanders, a seamstress from the North End district of Newport, a simpler area. The young woman had interrupted her pedagogy studies at the local college to care for her mother when she was diagnosed with a severe heart condition. Since then, she had accumulated jobs as a cleaner, a weekend waitress, and occasionally a substitute teacher in public schools. On a rare sunny morning in that New England winter, Julianne arrived at the mansion carrying a small colored box. Luke was waiting anxiously on the porch, it being the first time in a long time he had left his room of his own accord. "Did you bring it?" the boy asked, his eyes shining with anticipation. "I did. A promise is a debt," Julianne replied, opening the box to reveal a small handmade puppet theater. "I made it myself. It's not as pretty as the ones they sell in stores, but—" "It's perfect," Luke exclaimed, maneuvering his chair closer. Can we set it up now? Will you teach me how to use them? Julianne smiled, helping him remove the puppets made of colorful socks and buttons. Of course I will. And after you learn, we can invent our own stories. It was at that moment that Julianne noticed Gus watching them from the doorway. Unlike the first few weeks, when he always seemed hurried to leave, the entrepreneur now made a point of being present in small moments of daily life. He approached, sitting in a nearby chair. "May I watch the first show?" he asked with a discreet smile. "You can, Dad," Luke replied, excited. "Julianne will teach me how to use the puppets, and then we'll put on a show just for you." Gus watched his son, realizing how Julianne's presence had returned not only his voice, but also his confidence. Luke, who used to spend hours in silence, now talked non-stop, told stories and made plans. Physical therapy sessions, once seen as a sacrifice, became challenges he faced with determination. "Can you believe he stood for almost a full minute today?" commented the physical therapist Robert after a session. "His progress in the last few weeks has been impressive." "Julianne deserves a lot of credit for that," Gus replied, watching his son practice the exercises with enthusiasm. "She encourages him to keep going even when he's tired." In the afternoon, while Luke rested after physical therapy, Gus found Julianne in the kitchen, preparing a nutritious snack for the boy. "I need to thank you," he said, leaning against the kitchen counter. "What you've done for my son goes beyond any professional obligation." Julianne smiled, embarrassed. "You don't need to thank me. Luke is an incredible child. He just needed someone to believe in him." "Still, I want you to know that I recognize your effort," Gus continued. "By the way, I noticed you've been rushing out every day at 5 o'clock. Is there a problem?" Julianne hesitated, cutting the fruit more forcefully than necessary. "It's nothing serious. I just need to get home to give my mother her medicine and prepare her dinner." "Is your mother sick?" Gus asked, genuinely interested. "Yes, she has a severe heart condition," Julianne replied, trying to maintain her composure. "The medicines are expensive and the health insurance doesn't cover all of them. That's why I need to work so much." At that moment, Gus saw beyond the dedicated caregiver. He saw a woman fighting daily for her family, exactly as he should have done for his son, instead of hiding in work. "If you need any help with your mother, please let me know," he offered sincerely. "Thank you, but we're managing," Julianne replied, finishing the snack. What neither of them noticed was Vanessa's presence, listening to the conversation from the hallway, her fists clenched and her face contorted with rage. That night, after Julianne had left, Vanessa entered Gus's office with a glass of wine in her hand and her best smile. "Darling, I've been thinking. Maybe you're right about Julianne," she said, sitting on his lap. "I see how much Luke has improved with her around." Gus raised his eyebrows, surprised by the sudden change. "I'm glad you're finally seeing it. Actually, I had an idea," Vanessa continued, playing with his shirt buttons. "What do you think about helping her mother? We could pay for her full treatment as a bonus for good work." "That would be a great idea," Gus replied, kissing her lightly. "I'll talk to her tomorrow." No, Vanessa quickly interrupted. "It would be better if it were a surprise. Let me organize it for you. I just need her mother's details, where she lives, which hospital she frequents." Gus smiled, touched by his fiancée's apparent interest. "You're amazing, you know. Tomorrow I'll discreetly ask Julianne for that information." Meanwhile, across town in the North End district, Julianne sat by Mrs. Susan's bedside, helping her take her evening medication. "How was your day with the boy?" asked the grey-haired lady, whose strength of spirit contrasted with her physical fragility. "Better every day, Mom," Julianne replied, smiling. "Today he stood up alone during physical therapy. And he's talking up a storm. You should have seen his face telling stories with the puppets." Mrs. Susan looked at her daughter with tenderness. "You've always had that gift for bringing out the best in people, daughter. Ever since you were a child." "I'm just doing my job," Julianne deflected. "And the boy's father, how has he been treating you?" Julianne felt her face flush slightly. "Very well, Mr. Richmond is a decent man. He's trying hard to be a better father." "By your expression, I think he's more than just decent," Mrs. Susan joked, knowing her daughter well. "Mom, don't start that. He's my boss and he's engaged to that woman," Julianne chastised, unnecessarily straightening the sheets. "The one you said treats the boy coldly. That's her. Vanessa always seems so artificial. Nothing about her seems genuine, especially the affection she tries to show Luke in front of his father." Mrs. Susan gently took her daughter's hand. "Be careful, my daughter. Places that aren't ours often have traps we don't know about." The next morning, Vanessa woke up earlier than usual. While Gus was still asleep, she silently entered Luke's room. The boy was also sleeping deeply, clutching one of the puppets Julianne had given him. With calculated steps, Vanessa approached the nightstand, where Luke's cell phone, used mainly for educational games, lay. She unlocked the device, knowing the password, and quickly installed an application. Then, she sent a few messages to her own number, immediately deleting them from Luke's history. Before leaving, she opened the nightstand drawer and checked the medications the boy occasionally took for muscle pain after intense physical therapy sessions. She counted the pills, took 3 and put them in her purse. "Now yes," she murmured to herself, leaving the room with a sinister smile. "Let's see how much longer that little Saint Julianne lasts in this house." The sun had barely risen over the mountains of Newport when Julianne arrived at the mansion that Friday. Something in the air felt different, an almost palpable tension she couldn't define. Marlene, the cook, greeted her at the back door with a worried expression. "What happened?" Julianne asked, placing her bag on the kitchen counter. "Mrs. Campbell has been furious since early morning," Marlene whispered, nervously glancing at the door. "Mr. Richmond left for an emergency meeting, and she's been pacing the house like a caged tiger." Julianne nodded, trying to ignore the growing sense of apprehension within her. She went upstairs towards Luke's room, as she did every morning. But before she could reach the corridor, Vanessa's voice interrupted her. "Julianne, I need to speak with you now." The young caregiver turned, finding Vanessa standing at the top of the stairs, impeccably dressed in a wine-colored skirt and blazer set, contrasting with the calculated paleness of her face. "Good morning, Mrs. Campbell. Did something happen?" she asked, trying to remain calm. "In the office," Vanessa ordered, turning without waiting for a response. Gus's personal office was an imposing room, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive solid wood desk. Vanessa indicated a chair for Julianne and remained standing, maintaining a position of superiority. "Do you have anything to tell me?" Vanessa asked, crossing her arms. Julianne frowned, confused. "I don't understand, ma'am." "Don't play innocent," Vanessa retorted, approaching dangerously. "We found something very interesting on Luke's cell phone. Apparently, someone has been using his device to send messages." Before Julianne could respond, Vanessa slid a tablet across the desk. On the screen, text messages attributed to Luke's number appeared in a conversation with Vanessa's number. "The medicines are in the office drawer. I take 3 pills a day and no one will notice. I can sell each one for $50 at the market. My mother needs the money. The old man is foolish. He doesn't even notice when I make things disappear." Julianne felt her blood run cold. "That's a lie. I would never—" "Spare me the drama," Vanessa interrupted, taking back the tablet. "And that's not all. Gus noticed yesterday that some of Luke's painkillers were missing. Imagine my surprise when we decided to check your bag before you arrived today." With a theatrical gesture, Vanessa opened a small box on the table, revealing 3 pills identical to those Luke occasionally took. "This was in your bag," she stated, with a victorious smile. "The bag you conveniently left in the utility room last night." Julianne stood up, feeling her legs tremble. "That's impossible. I would never take anything from this house, much less Luke's medicine. Someone put that in my bag. It must be—" "The police are on their way," Vanessa interrupted with a disturbing calm. "Gus is devastated, as you can imagine. He really trusted you." "I need to talk to him," Julianne pleaded, feeling tears in her eyes. "This is a setup. Please let me explain to him." "Explain what?" "That you abused the trust of a family who gave you an opportunity. That you used a sick boy for your schemes." Vanessa's voice dripped with venom. "You've already caused enough damage." At that moment, the doorbell rang. 2 police officers were led to the office by Marlene, who avoided looking directly at Julianne. "That's her, officers," Vanessa indicated. "We found the medications in her bag, and we have the messages proving the intent to sell." "Mrs. Julianne Sanders," one of the officers asked, approaching, "we need you to come with us to the station to provide a statement." "This is a mistake," Julianne protested as tears streamed down her face. "I would never do that. Luke is like— I would never harm him." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer continued, impassive. Anything you say can be used against you in court." As she was led out of the mansion, Julianne saw Luke at his bedroom window, looking confused and frightened at the scene unfolding. His tear-filled eyes were the last image she carried with her as she entered the police car. At the historic district police station in Newport, Julianne spent hours giving her statement, incessantly repeating her innocence. With no criminal record, and given the small quantity of medications, she was released to await trial freely, but with a restraining order prohibiting her from approaching the Richmond residence or contacting any family member. When she finally arrived home, it was already night. Mrs. Susan was waiting for her in the small living room, her face marked by worry. "My daughter, what happened?" "The neighbor said she saw you leaving in a police car." Julianne collapsed onto the worn sofa, too weak to hold back the crying she had repressed throughout the interrogation. "They think I stole medicine, Mom. Luke's medicine." She sobbed as her mother hugged her. "Someone put it in my bag and invented messages as if I was planning to sell them." "But that's absurd. Who would do such a thing?" Mrs. Susan asked, stroking her daughter's hair. "Vanessa. It could only have been her," Julianne replied, wiping away tears. "She never liked me, always looked at me as if I were a threat." "And the boss? What did he say?" "I couldn't even talk to him." "Vanessa made sure I didn't get that chance," she explained, feeling a new wave of hopelessness. "Now I have a restraining order. I can't even go near the house to explain the truth." The next morning, Julianne woke up to the sound of the telephone. It was her public defender, informing her that the Richmond family had formalized her dismissal for just cause and were considering filing a lawsuit for breach of trust and attempted theft. The following days were a blur of despair. Out of a job and with a formal accusation tarnishing her name, Julianne saw doors closing one after another. The families for whom she occasionally cleaned cancelled her services. The public school where she occasionally taught as a substitute informed her that it would be better to await the resolution of the case before calling her again. To pay the bills and her mother's medicine, Julianne sold her small television, then her cell phone, replacing it with a simpler model. She got a night job as a cleaner in a commercial building downtown, working from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. "You need to rest." "Daughter," Mrs. Susan pleaded, seeing her arrive exhausted every morning, "you can't keep this pace." "I have no choice, Mom. We need to pay the lawyer, your medicine, the rent." What hurt most, however, was thinking about Luke. How was the boy? Did he believe she had betrayed him? Did he think of her as a criminal? For several nights, Julianne woke with a start, dreaming of the boy's sad eyes in the window as she was taken away by the police. At the Richmond mansion, the atmosphere was no less tense. Luke had closed himself off again, refusing to interact with anyone, including Vanessa, who now tried to assume the role of caregiver. "He hasn't eaten properly in days," Marlene commented to Gus when Vanessa wasn't around. "He spends hours looking out the window, waiting for Julianne to come back." "But she betrayed our trust, Marlene," Gus replied, though his tone revealed more doubt than conviction. "The evidence is there. With all due respect, sir, but that girl adored Luke. I never saw her do anything that wasn't out of love for him." Gus spent more and more time in his office, reviewing the events of that fateful morning. Something didn't fit. How could Julianne, always so dedicated and affectionate, have betrayed his trust in that way? Why would she use Luke's cell phone to send incriminating messages to Vanessa's number, instead of using her own phone to contact a potential buyer? One afternoon, while Luke slept after a particularly difficult physical therapy session, the boy had lost much of his motivation since Julianne's departure, Gus decided to re-examine the security video that supposedly showed Julianne putting the medications in her bag. Sitting in his office, he watched the recording several times. The scene showed Julianne entering the utility room, taking something from the table, and putting it in her bag. The image was not very clear, but Vanessa had assured him that these were the medicines later found in the caregiver's bag. It was on the 6th viewing that Gus noticed something strange. Julianne's shadow on the wall did not exactly correspond to her movements. There was a slight discrepancy, almost imperceptible, but which an eye trained in technology like his could detect. "This is not possible," he murmured to himself, pausing the video. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Gus called a video analysis specialist a former employee of his company who now worked in digital forensics. Without revealing details of the case, he asked him to analyze the recording for any signs of tampering. 2 days later, the specialist returned with a detailed report. The video was manipulated, he confirmed, showing the points where the editing was perceptible. Someone inserted this sequence into the original recording. Furthermore, the file does not have the typical metadata of this house's security system. It came from another device. What do you mean, another device? Gus questioned, feeling his stomach churn. Probably a cell phone or tablet, the expert explained. Someone recorded this scene separately, edited it, and then inserted it into the system as if it were part of the original recording. That night, while they were having dinner, Gus observed Vanessa with new eyes. Every gesture, every word now seemed calculated, part of a grand act. "How is Luke?" he asked, maintaining a casual tone. "Getting better," Vanessa replied, pouring herself some wine. "He still misses that person, but he'll get over it soon. Children forget quickly." "Really?" Gus questioned, cutting his meat more forcefully than necessary. "Because Marlene told me he's barely been eating." Vanessa let out an irritated sigh. "Marlene exaggerates. She also had too much attachment to that cleaner. By the way, we need to hire someone more reliable to replace her. I thought of bringing my cousin from Saratoga Springs. She has experience with special needs children." "Before we think about replacements," Gus interrupted, placing his cutlery on the plate, "I need to ask you something." "Vanessa." She raised her eyes, maintaining her perfectly rehearsed smile. "Of course, darling. What is it? Why did you falsify that security video?" The following weeks at the Richmond mansion passed with a tranquility long unexperienced. Vanessa's absence seemed to have removed a dark cloud that hung over the house. Peter progressed rapidly in his physical therapy, spending more and more time on crutches and less in his wheelchair. His laughter once again echoed through the corridors, especially during games and story sessions with Julianne. For Gus, this period brought a profound revelation. How long had he not truly listened to his son? How many precious moments had he lost, buried in meetings and documents fleeing the pain of Eliza's loss? The entrepreneur began to reorganize his schedule, delegating responsibilities and creating space to be present in Peter's life. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, while Julianne was not there, father and son chatted sitting by the pool. Peter was playing with one of the paper boats he had learned to make with his caregiver. "Dad, do you still miss Mom?" the boy suddenly asked. Gus took a deep breath. These conversations were difficult but necessary. "Every day, son. Your mother was an extraordinary person. But you know, with time the pain transforms. It turns into a longing that we can carry." Peter nodded, thoughtful. His next words caught Gus off guard. "I think Aunt Julianne is helping us carry that longing, isn't she?" The entrepreneur smiled, surprised by his son's insight. "Yes, I think so. She has been very special to us." "Do you like her, Dad? Really like her?" Gus choked on the juice he was drinking. "Why that question, Peter?" "Because you smile differently when she's around. Just like you used to smile at Mom before she got sick." The innocent observation struck Gus like a bolt of clarity. It was true, something had changed. Julianne's presence, her silent strength, her kindness without subservience, had awakened feelings he thought were buried with Eliza. "It's complicated, son. Julianne works for us and Mom would have liked her," Peter declared with the direct simplicity of children. "She always said she wanted us to be happy, even when she wasn't here anymore." His son's words echoed in Gus's mind for the rest of the day. That night, alone in his office, he contemplated a photograph of Eliza. Her radiant smile seemed to say, "Move forward." On Monday, when Julianne arrived for work, Gus invited her for a conversation. She entered the office a little apprehensive. The last times they had talked there had not been pleasant. "Did I do something wrong, sir?" she asked, nervously adjusting the hem of the simple blouse she wore. "On the contrary," Gus smiled, indicating the chair in front of him. "I wanted to talk about your situation here at the house. Any problem with my work?" "No, Julianne. In fact, I'd like to formalize your position as Peter's full-time caregiver. No more cleaning duties with assigned contract benefits and a substantially higher salary." Julianne's eyes widened. "Mr. Richmond, I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," he replied with a smile. "But there's more. I know your mother needs special care. I'd like to offer a health plan that covers her treatments. Tears began to form in Julianne's eyes. Why? Why are you doing this for me? Gus stood up and walked to the window, watching the garden where Peter was playing with Josephine. You gave my son his life back, Julianne, and in a way mine too. It's the least I can do. There was something more in his words, an unexpressed feeling hanging in the air between them. Julianne felt it too, but both silently agreed not to name it. Not yet. I accept, sir, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Great, and please stop calling me sir. Gus is fine. The shy smile she gave him confirmed that he had made the right decision. Life in the mansion acquired a new routine. Julianne now occupied a small apartment in the back annex, which allowed her to be always nearby when Peter needed her. Mrs. Zelda, initially reluctant to leave her small apartment in the outskirts, eventually moved in too, after her heart problems worsened and required constant care. For Peter, having Grandma Zelda nearby was an added joy. The elderly lady, with her stories from the South and her homemade sweets, filled a void left by his maternal grandmother, whom he had never known. On an August afternoon, 3 months after Vanessa's turbulent departure, Gus returned early from the office. He found Peter, Julianne, and Mrs. Zelda in the kitchen making chocolate fudge balls. The scene, his son's hands dirty with chocolate, Julianne's smile, Mrs. Zelda's loving supervision, provoked a wave of emotion that almost left him breathless. This was it, he realized. This was what made a house a home. "Dad, we're making chocolate fudge balls for the school party tomorrow," Peter exclaimed excitedly. "I see, champ. Can I help?" "Of course. Aunt Julianne is teaching me how to roll them. It's harder than it looks." Gus washed his hands and joined them. As they worked together, he felt filled with a simple joy he hadn't experienced in a long time. His eyes met Julianne's several times, and with each exchange of glances something grew between them. Later, when Peter was asleep and Mrs. Zelda had retired to her room, Gus invited Julianne for coffee on the porch. The night was starry, a rarity in New York City. "I've been thinking a lot about how life comes full circle," he commented, observing the city lights in the distance. 6 months ago I was lost. Peter was drifting away and I didn't know how to reach him. Julianne nodded, sipping her coffee. "Grief does that. It isolates us even when we're surrounded by people." "How do you know so much about it?" She smiled sadly. "Personal experience. I lost my father when I was 14. It was as if a part of me went away with him. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, but I understand, Peter. That feeling that nothing will ever be the same." Gus gathered his courage and reached for Julianne's hand across the table. "Nothing will be the same, but it can be good in a different way. You showed us that." She didn't withdraw her hand. Her eyes in the soft moonlight shone with contained emotion. "Gus, Julianne hesitated. "This is complicated. I'm your employee." "It's more than that, and you know it." He gently squeezed her hand. "I'm not asking for anything now. I just want you to know that what I feel for you goes beyond gratitude." Before she could respond, Gus's phone rang. He answered, frowning as he heard the voice on the other end. "I have to take this. I'm sorry," he said, standing up. "Can we continue this conversation later?" Julianne nodded, remaining on the porch as he went back inside. The starry sky witnessed the turmoil of emotions in her chest. It was undeniable. She had also fallen in love. But she was afraid. Afraid Gus was confusing gratitude with love. Afraid of the social differences between them. Afraid Peter wouldn't accept a relationship between them. Inside the office, the call Gus had taken brought disturbing news. "Mr. Richmond, this is Caesar from security. We've noticed suspicious behavior in the last few days. A black car has been parked in front of the mansion for prolonged periods. Today, when one of our agents approached, the driver sped off quickly." "Were you able to identify the vehicle?" "Partially. It's a luxury sedan, probably rented. We're checking the neighborhood cameras." After hanging up, Gus remained thoughtful. "Was it just a coincidence, Or was there something more sinister behind that surveillance? His thoughts inevitably turned to Vanessa. Since she had left the mansion, she had disappeared off the map. His lawyer's attempts to contact her had been ignored. It was as if she had evaporated, which, knowing her, was more worrying than comforting. His protective instinct kicked in. He called an emergency meeting with the security team for the next morning and decided not to mention the incident to Julianne or Peter to avoid alarming them unnecessarily. What Gus didn't know was that, at that exact moment, 20 miles away, in a luxurious penthouse in Greenwich Village, Vanessa was looking at photos of the mansion on her laptop. Beside her, a middle-aged man with harsh features and a scar on his chin studied a floor plan of the property. Security is reinforced, but there are blind spots here and here, he indicated. The back wall is the most vulnerable. I don't want them to hurt the boy, Vanessa warned, pouring herself a glass of wine. I just want to scare them enough, so they understand they can't discard me like trash. Understood, Mrs. Campbell. It will just be a warning visit. She smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. After the man left, she opened a folder containing detailed information about Julianne, old address, routine, data on her sick mother. There was even a medical report on Mrs. Zelda, illegally obtained. You may have won the first battle, cleaner, she murmured to herself, but the war has only just begun. At the mansion, oblivious to the approaching danger, Julianne checked on Peter one last time before retiring. The boy slept peacefully, a slight smile on his lips. She adjusted the blanket and kissed his forehead. In the hallway, she found Gus leaving the office. There was concern in his eyes, but he tried to hide it. Is everything all right? She asked. Yes, just work matters. He forced a smile. About our conversation. Can we continue tomorrow? Julianne gently suggested. It's been a long day, and we both need to think. Gus nodded, respecting her space. Of course. Good night, Julianne. Good night, Gus. Each went to their room, carrying conflicting thoughts and feelings. On the horizon, dark clouds began to form, foreshadowing the approaching storm, both in the sky and in the life of that newly formed family. In the darkness of the night, the black sedan parked again, this time further from the mansion. Its occupant watched through binoculars, mapping the security guard's routine, calculating the perfect moment to turn the regained peace into a new nightmare. The day dawned grey in New York City, with heavy clouds announcing an imminent storm. Peter looked out his bedroom window, watching the strong wind shake the garden trees. It was Friday, but classes had been suspended due to a severe storm warning issued by the Civil Defense. Looks like we'll have a day of movies and hot chocolate. Huh? Julianne commented, entering the room with a breakfast tray. Peter smiled. In recent weeks, his legs had gained considerable strength. The physical therapist, Dr. Maurice, was impressed with his progress and attributed much of the improvement to the new family dynamic. Is Grandma Zelda going to make that cornmeal cake I like? The boy asked hopefully. If you ask nicely, I'm sure she will. Downstairs, Gus was talking in a low voice with Sergio, the head of security. The incidents with the mysterious car had ceased a few days ago, but he hadn't let his guard down. He had reinforced the team, installed new cameras and motion sensors at strategic points on the property. Still nothing suspicious? He asked, checking the camera images on the tablet. Nothing, sir, but we remain on high alert. Good. And that information about Vanessa? Sergio consulted his notes. According to our sources, she was in Saratoga Springs for a period, but returned to the U.S. 2 weeks ago. She bought a penthouse in Greenwich Village, cash. She has been meeting frequently with Richard Valerius. Gus frowned upon hearing that name. Richard Valerius had been his partner in the early days of Richmond construction. The partnership ended bitterly when Gus discovered embezzlement and bribery schemes involving his former partner. The breakup cost Gus millions, who preferred to pay to get rid of the association rather than maintain ties with corrupt practices. That's not good news, he murmured. Valeria still holds a grudge, and with Vanessa feeding that grudge. We've redoubled surveillance, sir. No one enters here without being identified. After the meeting, Gus tried to dispel the worry and focus on more pleasant matters. He went up to Peter's room, where he found his son and Julianne assembling a complex puzzle at the small table by the window. "How are you two doing?" "Dad, we're almost finished with the dragon. Look." Gus smiled, sitting on the edge of the bed. He watched with tenderness the interaction between Julianne and his son. There was a natural harmony between them, as if they were pieces of the same puzzle. The conversation from the previous night still resonated in his mind. He had made his feelings clear, but he would respect Julianne's time. "I think we should have a movie marathon this afternoon," he suggested, "with popcorn and hot chocolate. What do you think? Are you going to stay home all day?" Peter asked, his eyes shining with excitement. "All day. I cancelled all meetings." Julianne raised an eyebrow, surprised. Gus Richmond, the workaholic entrepreneur she had known months ago, cancelling meetings for a family day. The transformation was remarkable. The morning passed peacefully, with the wind progressively increasing outside. Around noon, the storm finally broke over the city. Lightning cut through the sky, followed by deafening thunder that made Peter shrink on the TV room sofa. "You don't need to be afraid," Julianne reassured him. "We're safe in here." Gus returned from the kitchen with a tray of sandwiches prepared by Mrs. Zelda. Josephine had been dismissed earlier to prevent her from getting stuck in the storm, as had the other household staff. Only the security team remained, divided into shifts. When the first movie ended, Gus received a call from Sergio. "Sir, the storm damaged part of the security system. The cameras in the east sector are down, and the emergency generator isn't working properly. How long to restore?" "Oz, the technician can't get here with this rain. We're doing more frequent rounds to compensate, but we're short-staffed due to the storm." "Understood. Keep me informed of any news." He hung up with an uneasy feeling. Was it just a coincidence, or was there something more sinister behind that perfect timing? He decided not to alarm the family, but he would remain vigilant. The afternoon progressed with the movie marathon. Peter fell asleep on the sofa during the third movie, exhausted from the day's excitement. Julianne adjusted a blanket over him and sat down again next to Gus. "He's so happy today," she commented in a low voice. "Thanks to you." Gus dared to take her hand. "Julianne, about last night." She didn't withdraw her hand, but her gaze revealed uncertainty. "Gus, I feel the same way you do. But I'm scared. I come from a world so different from yours. People will talk. Let them talk. What matters is how we feel. And Peter, do you think he would accept?" Gus smiled. "I'm sure he would. He was the one who asked me if I liked you." "That way." Julianne blushed, laughing softly. "Children are very observant. So, can we try? One step at a time?" She nodded, her eyes meeting his with new determination. One step at a time. The moment was interrupted by a sudden blackout. The entire house plunged into absolute darkness. "The generator should have come on automatically," Gus commented, alarmed. He grabbed his cell phone to call Sergio, but there was no signal. "Strange, the cell phone also has no signal." "It must be the storm," Julianne suggested, though she also felt a shiver of apprehension. "I'll check the power panel. Stay here with Peter." Gus left the TV room, using his cell phone flashlight to illuminate the way. The silence in the house was disturbing, interrupted only by the sound of rain lashing against the windows. Julianne sat beside Peter, who continued to sleep, oblivious to the events. She had a bad feeling, a restlessness she couldn't explain. 10 minutes passed and Gus did not return. The storm seemed to worsen outside, the lightning closer and closer, briefly illuminating the room through the slightly open curtains. During one of these flashes, Julianne glimpsed a silhouette in the garden. It didn't look like one of the security guards. It moved stealthily, as if trying not to be seen. Her heart pounded. "Peter, wake up." She gently shook the boy. "We need to go to your room." "What is it?" he mumbled sleepily. "A new game. We're going to hide and your dad has to find us." She tried to keep her voice calm despite the growing dread. Peter yawned, still half asleep, but allowed Julianne to help him up. Silently, she guided him out of the TV room towards the stairs. In the hallway, they heard a noise coming from the kitchen, breaking glass. "Aunt Julianne, what was that?" Peter was now fully awake, his eyes wide. "Shh, darling. Let's continue our game. We need to be very quiet." Upstairs, Julianne took Peter to his room. She locked the door and pushed a heavy dresser to block it. Then she dialed 911 on the room's landline, but the line was dead. "Peter, listen carefully," she whispered, crouching down to his eye level. "I think there are bad people trying to get into the house. We need to stay hidden until your dad or the police arrive, okay?" Peter nodded, his green eyes wide with fear but trusting her completely. "Where's my dad?" "He'll be fine." Julianne prayed it was true. "He's smart and strong." They heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Julianne led Peter to the spacious closet and hid him among the hanging clothes. "No matter what happens, don't come out until your dad or I come get you." "Understood?" The boy nodded, silent tears streaming down his pale face. "I'm going to hide too," she lied, kissing his forehead. "It's just a game, remember?" She closed the closet door and looked around, searching for something she could use as a weapon. Her eyes found a golf trophy on the shelf, heavy enough to cause damage. The footsteps were now in the hallway, approaching the room. Julianne positioned herself behind the door, the trophy raised, breathing as silently as possible. The doorknob turned, meeting resistance from the locked door. There was a moment of pause, then a strong impact. Someone was trying to break down the door. The dresser moved a few inches with the impact. Another attempt, and the door partially yielded. A hand covered by a black glove appeared in the opening, trying to reach the dresser to push it. Julianne closed her eyes for a second, gathering courage, then delivered a strong blow with the trophy onto the exposed fingers. A roar of pain echoed, and the hand disappeared. Male shouts in the hallway indicated there was more than one intruder. Julianne reinforced the barricade, dragging an armchair next to the dresser. "He must be in here," a deep voice ordered from the other side. "Break down this door now." Another impact, stronger, made the dresser slide a few more inches. Julianne knew it wouldn't hold much longer. She ran to the window. They were on the second floor. The fall would be dangerous, but maybe there was another option. The roof below the window offered a narrow path to the adjacent room. If she could distract the intruders and escape that way with Peter. A third impact, and the barricade gave way. The door swung open, revealing 3 masked men. The one in front, with one hand bloody, advanced towards Julianne. "Where's the boy?" he demanded. "What boy?" "I'm alone here." She tried to buy time, holding the trophy in a defensive position. "Don't play smart. We know the brat is here. Our job is to take him, and that's what we're going to do." Julianne felt her blood run cold. It wasn't a common robbery. They came specifically for Peter, and probably on Vanessa's orders. "He's not here. His dad took him to his grandmother's house yesterday." The man laughed humorlessly. "Liar, we're going to turn this room upside down until we find him." At that moment, they heard a deafening crash coming from downstairs, followed by shouts and the unmistakable sound of gunfire. The intruders exchanged worried glances. "The police!" one of them shouted. "It's not possible. We cut all communications." The leader grabbed Julianne by the arm. "Where's the silent alarm system? How did you call for backup?" Before she could answer, the door to the neighboring room exploded and Gus emerged, wielding a golf club. His face was stained with blood from a cut on his temple, but his eyes burned with fury. Taking advantage of the distraction, Julianne struck the man holding her with the trophy. He staggered back, releasing her. Gus advanced, landing a precise blow on the second intruder. The third man pulled out a gun, but before he could aim it, a mansion security guard appeared at the door, his pistol already in position. "Police! Everyone on the ground now!" The intruders, realizing the plan had failed, tried to flee. One of them jumped out the window, falling onto the lower roof. The other 2 were quickly subdued by the police officers coming up the stairs. Julianne ran to the closet and opened the door. Peter was huddled in the darkest corner, trembling violently. Seeing her, he threw himself into her arms, sobbing, "It's all right now, my love. It's all right. You're safe." Gus joined them, hugging his son and Julianne simultaneously, forming a protective circle. His hands trembled as much as his son's, but his eyes, meeting Julianne's, conveyed a clear message, infinite gratitude for the courage she had shown. Outside, the storm began to subside, as did the chaos inside the mansion. But everyone knew that this was not the end, only the first act of a meticulously planned revenge. And the mind behind it was still at large, fueled by a hatred that the rain could not wash away. The police interrogation room was cold and impersonal. Sitting side by side, Gus and Julianne recounted the events of the previous night for the third time to Detective Rachel Summers, a black woman with a serious expression and keen eyes. The intruders confessed they were hired, but refused to say by whom, the detective informed, consulting her notes. However, they all have connections to Richard Valerius, your former partner, Mr. Richmond. Gus pinched the bridge of his nose, exhausted. He had spent the night at the hospital with Peter, who had to be sedated due to emotional shock. Mrs. Zelda, who had been in the back annex during the invasion, was now caring for the boy at the mansion, under police protection. Valerius and Vanessa are working together, he stated with certainty. This wasn't a common robbery. They came specifically for my son, the detective nodded. Based on the evidence, we agree. This constitutes attempted kidnapping, in addition to home invasion and assault. Unfortunately, we don't have direct evidence against Valerius or your ex-fiancé. Can't you trace the money? The phone calls? Julianne asked, her voice still trembling from the experience. We're working on it. We've issued warrants for phone and bank records, but it takes time. In the meantime, I suggest you strengthen your home security and consider temporarily relocating. Gus shook his head. I won't let them drive us out of our own home. I'll hire additional security, put Peter in virtual classes temporarily. But we're not running away. The drive home was silent, each lost in their thoughts. In the back seat of the armored SUV, Julianne watched the city through the window. The sense of security she had cultivated in recent months had shattered like a crystal vase thrown to the floor. At the mansion, Peter awaited them anxiously. Seeing them enter, he ran as fast as his legs allowed and threw himself into his father's arms. You took so long. I thought you had gone away forever. Gus lifted his son, holding him tight against his chest. Never, son. I'll never leave you. The following days were an adjustment to a new reality. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter of the house 24 hours a day. Additional security cameras were installed. Peter no longer went to school, receiving private lessons at home. Gus rarely left, coordinating his businesses via video conference. The mansion, once a space of renewal and joy, had transformed into a tense fortress. On a particularly muggy afternoon, 2 weeks after the invasion, Julianne found Gus in the office, his eyes fixed on the computer screen. Have the investigations progressed? She asked, placing a cup of coffee beside him. Little. The police found the car used by the intruders, but it was registered with false documents. He sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. Vanessa is smart. She leaves no traces. Julianne sat in the chair opposite the desk. This can't continue, Gus. Peter is having nightmares every night. He needs normalcy, not to live like a prisoner. I know. His voice revealed frustration and helplessness. But what can I do? Until we're sure Vanessa and Valerius can't harm us, maybe we should move for a while. Go abroad, who knows? The suggestion hung between them. Gus contemplated it seriously for the first time. His eyes met Julianne's, and at that moment, something solidified between them. A mutual understanding, a partnership that transcended labels. Would you come with us? He asked softly. If you want me to, she replied simply. Gus stood up and walked around the desk, kneeling before the chair where Julianne was sitting. He took her hands in his. I want more than that, Julianne. I want you by my side, not as an employee, not as a friend, but as my partner. I know it's early, that we're still getting to know each other, but these last few months have shown me that what I feel for you is real and profound. Tears glistened in her eyes. I feel the same, Gus, but I'm afraid. Afraid of what people will say. Afraid of not being accepted into your world. Afraid that one day you'll realize you made a mistake. He gently touched her face. The only mistake would be to let fear prevent us from being happy. As for what people think, I don't care. And my world, Julianne, you transformed my world. You brought color back into our lives. She smiled through tears and, leaning in, allowed her lips to meet his for the first time. The kiss was soft, delicate like a seal on a silent promise. When they parted, Gus smiled. Shall we tell Peter together? I think he'll be thrilled. Before they could leave the office, Gus's cell phone rang. It was Detective Rachel. Mr. Richmond, we have news. We managed to track some bank transfers from Vanessa to offshore accounts linked to Valerius. It's circumstantial, but enough to subpoena them for questioning. We're on our way to their addresses now. A spark of hope ignited in Gus's chest. Does that mean we'll have some legal protection? Possibly. If we can link them to the invasion, we can request protective measures. Stay alert and continue with reinforced security for now. We'll contact you as soon as we have more information." After hanging up, Gus shared the news with Julianne. A small relief amidst the storm. "Let's tell Peter the good news," he suggested, intertwining his fingers with hers. They found the boy in the garden, where he was practicing walking without crutches under Mrs. Zelda's supervision. His progress was admirable. He could take several steps unsupported, though still with some instability. "Dad, Aunt Julianne, look what I can do," he exclaimed proudly, taking 5 firm steps towards them. "That's wonderful, son," Gus applauded, feeling his chest swell with pride. "I'm almost ready to go back to school and play soccer with my friends," Peter declared confidently. Gus and Julianne exchanged glances. School was still a delicate subject. But at that moment they decided to focus on the good news. "Peter, we have something to tell you," Gus began, sitting on a garden bench and pulling his son to his side. Julianne sat on the other side of the boy. "It's about Julianne and me." The boy looked from one to the other, curious. We are." Gus hesitated, suddenly unsure how to explain. "Your dad and I have discovered we like each other very much," Julianne intervened softly. "Like a couple." Peter frowned for an instant, processing the information. Then, to the adult's surprise, he broke into a wide smile. "Finally, I already knew." "First, what have you knew?" Gus asked, astonished. "Of course!" "You two keep looking at each other in that weird way adults do when they like each other. Just like Uncle Charles and Aunt Denise at school." Gus and Julianne laughed, relieved. Peter continued, now more serious. "Does this mean Aunt Julianne is going to live with us forever? And that she's going to be, like, my new mom?" The question caught Julianne by surprise. She exchanged a look with Gus before carefully answering, "Peter, no one could ever replace your mom. She will always be your mom, always in your heart. I would never try to take her place. But if you allow me, I would love to be part of your family, to take care of you and love you in my own way." Peter thought for a moment, then nodded gravely. "I think Mom would have liked you, Aunt Julianne. She always said the most important thing was for us to be happy." The child's wisdom left them speechless. Gus pulled his son into a tight hug, and Julianne joined them, forming a circle of affection that seemed, at that moment, impenetrable. The next morning brought a sense of renewed hope. At breakfast, Peter announced to Josephine and Mrs. Zelda that Dad and Aunt Julianne are dating, causing knowing smiles between the two women, who had already noticed the chemistry between the boss and the caregiver for weeks. Gus decided to take Peter to the physical therapist's office, something they had avoided in recent weeks. With 2 security cars accompanying them, it seemed safe enough for a quick outing. Julianne would stay home with Mrs. Zelda, preparing a surprise for Peter's return, a small party to celebrate his physical therapy progress and the new family arrangement. The morning passed peacefully. Julianne prepared chocolate fudge balls with Mrs. Zelda in the kitchen, while the security guards patrolled the property with their usual diligence. Nothing indicated it would be a different day. At 11:30 a.m., Gus called to say they were leaving the doctor's office. "Dr. Maurice is impressed with Peter's progress. He said in a few weeks he'll be able to ditch the crutches completely." "That's wonderful. We're preparing a surprise to celebrate," Julianne replied animatedly. "We'll be there in about 30 minutes. "I love you," Gus said, the phrase still sounding new and special between them. "I love you too. Drive safely." 20 minutes later, as Julianne finished decorating the table for the small celebration, the house phone rang. It was Mark, the head of security, accompanying Gus and Peter. "Julianne, there's been an accident." His voice sounded tense, almost mechanical. "A black car deliberately collided with our van on the Long Island Expressway. We flipped." Julianne's blood ran cold. "Gus, Peter, how are they?" "Mr. Richmond is conscious with minor injuries, but..." There was a terrible pause. "Peter was taken, Julianne. Armed men snatched him from the car before we could react. It was all very fast, very organized." The world seemed to slow around her. She felt dizzy, her legs weakening. Mrs. Zelda approached, alarmed, holding her arm. "Where are you?" "Are you calling the police?" she managed to ask, her voice almost unrecognizable. "We've already alerted them. We're on our way to Mount Sinai Hospital. Mr. Richmond is asking you to meet us there." Julianne hung up and quickly explained the situation to Mrs. Zelda, who clasped her hands to her mouth in shock. Minutes later, accompanied by 2 security guards, Julianne was heading to the hospital, praying as she had never prayed before. She found Gus in the emergency room, being attended to by a doctor. His face was cut by glass shards, and a bandage wrapped his right arm. When he saw her enter, he tried to get up, but the doctor stopped him. "Peter," was all he could say, his eyes red from desperate crying. "The police are already on the case," she informed, holding his uninjured hand. "They'll find him, Gus. They'll bring our boy back." Detective Rachel arrived moments later, accompanied by 2 investigators. Her expression was grave. "Mr. Richmond, we need your full statement about what happened. Every detail could be crucial." Gus recounted everything mechanically. The black car appearing out of nowhere, the deliberate collision, the van flipping 3 times before stopping. Masked men quickly approaching, breaking the window and pulling Peter out, who screamed and struggled. It had all happened in less than 2 minutes. "We managed to get images from traffic cameras," the detective informed. "The car used in the kidnapping was rented, with cloned license plates. We're tracing it, but..." At that moment, Gus's phone rang, unknown number. He answered immediately, putting it on speakerphone. "Gus Richmond," an electronically distorted voice sounded. "I believe you're looking for something that belongs to us. Where is my son?" he roared, desperation giving way to fury. "If you lay a finger on him, your son is fine for now. If you want him to stay that way, listen carefully. $5 million in cash tomorrow at midnight. We will indicate the location a few hours beforehand. No police, no tricks, or you'll never see the boy again. How do I know he's okay? Let me talk to him." There was a pause, then Peter's trembling voice sounded. "Dad, I'm scared. I want to go home. We're coming to get you, son. Be strong. Everything will be all right." Gus tried to sound confident, but his voice betrayed his anguish. The distorted voice returned. "Now you know he's alive. Keep it that way, cooperating. And remember, no police." The call ended abruptly. The detective, who had heard everything, immediately began giving orders to trace the call. Gus sank into the chair, his face in his hands. "I'll pay," he declared. "I don't care about the money. I just want my son back." The detective approached. "Mr. Richmond, I understand your distress, but we need to be strategic. They are probably monitoring your movements. We have to simulate cooperation while we work behind the scenes." Julianne, who had remained silent until then, intervened. "I'll go with you, Gus, to deliver the ransom." He looked at her, surprised. "No, it's too dangerous. Peter is my responsibility now, too. And 2 people have a better chance of identifying important details, of finding a way out if something goes wrong." The determination in her eyes admitted no dispute. She was the same woman who had faced armed intruders to protect Peter, who had brought him back to life after his mother's loss. Gus knew it was pointless to argue. "We'll work with 2 scenarios," the detective proposed. "Officially, you will follow the kidnapper's instructions. Unofficially, we will have tactical teams ready to intervene at the right moment. Your safety and Peter's are our priority." The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Gus, released from the hospital, met with his bank manager to arrange the money. Julianne coordinated with the detective to establish discreet communication protocols during the operation. Meanwhile, police teams scoured all possible hiding places for Vanessa and Valerius, unfortunately without success. At 7 p.m., Gus's cell phone rang again. This time, a text message with GPS coordinates and specific instructions for the ransom delivery. The countdown to the most crucial moment of their lives had begun, and somewhere in New York City, a frightened boy waited for rescue, while his captors planned an outcome no one could predict. Night fell over New York City as Gus and Julianne left the mansion, carrying the heavy briefcase with $5 million in cash. Against Detective Rachel's recommendations, they had opted for a single, unarmored SUV, as the kidnappers had demanded. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Gus asked Julianne one last time, as he drove towards the provided coordinates. She wore a simple cotton blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back in an unpretentious bun. Nothing in her appearance revealed the storm of emotions consuming her inside. "Absolutely," she replied firmly. "Peter needs both of us." Their destination was an old industrial warehouse in the Brooklyn Navy Yard area, ironically not far from the neighborhood where Julianne had grown up. The coincidence did not go unnoticed by her. "I know this area," she commented. "Many of these warehouses have been abandoned for years. Perfect place for a kidnapping, isolated with multiple escape routes." Gus nodded, once again admiring the practical intelligence of the woman who had entered his life as a transformative force. If they could bring Peter back, if they survived that night, he would not wait any longer to formalize what his heart had known for months. "We're here," he announced, parking 100 yards from the indicated warehouse. According to instructions, they were to proceed on foot from there. "Remember the agreement with the detective." Julianne checked, adjusting the small communicator disguised as an earring. "Any sign of imminent danger, the code word is star." "Star," Gus repeated, unconsciously touching the watch where another listening device was hidden. He knew that, despite the kidnappers' prohibition, police tactical teams were positioned nearby, ready to act at the slightest signal. They walked in silence, the briefcase heavy between them. The warehouse loomed ahead like a gigantic shadow silhouetted against the night sky. All the windows were dark, and a disturbing silence enveloped the place. Upon reaching the main entrance, they found it unlocked. Another bad sign. Professional kidnappers wouldn't leave accesses open unless it was a trap. "I don't like this," Gus murmured. "Neither do I," Julianne agreed. "But we have no choice." They pushed the heavy metal door, which creaked in protest against years of rust and abandonment. The interior of the warehouse was plunged into shadows, with only a single spotlight in the center, illuminating a chair where a small figure sat. "Peter!" Gus exclaimed, stepping forward impulsively. Julianne held his arm. "Calm down. It could be a trap." As if responding to her suspicions, additional lights came on, revealing the spacious area. Peter was indeed in the chair, his hands tied in front and a blindfold over his eyes. He seemed unharmed, though visibly frightened. "Dad? Is that you?" His childlike voice echoed through the empty space. "We're here, son," Gus replied, his voice choked with emotion. "We came to get you." "How touching," a female voice sounded from the shadows, followed by slow, calculated footsteps. Vanessa emerged into view, dressed entirely in black, her face a mask of cruel satisfaction. The family reunited again. Beside her, Richard Valerius appeared, a corpulent middle-aged man with an unpleasant smile. In his right hand, something gleaming, a gun. "You brought the money, I presume?" he asked, as if discussing any commercial transaction. Gus raised the briefcase. "5 million, as you asked." "Now release my son." Vanessa laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the metal walls. "Oh, Gus, always so straightforward about business. But today it's not just about money." She approached Peter, stroking his hair in a disturbingly gentle manner. The boy flinched at her touch. "You know, I really tried to like this boy. I tried to imagine myself as his stepmother, raising him, shaping him in my image. But he never cooperated, never accepted me." Her fingers momentarily tightened in Peter's hair, making him wince in pain. "And then you, Gus, chose a cleaner instead of me. A domestic worker, over the woman who stood by your side for 2 years. "You were never by my side, Vanessa," Gus retorted, controlling his anger. "You were only by the side of my money, my status. You never loved me or my son. Love?" She spat the word as if it were poison. "Love is for the weak, for the sentimental like you. What matters is power, position, recognition." Valerius approached, the gun still casually pointed in their direction. "Enough talk. The money, please." Julianne stepped forward, placing herself partially between Gus and the kidnappers. "How do we know you'll release Peter after you get the money?" Vanessa turned her cold eyes to Julianne, scrutinizing her with contempt. The people's heroine, the woman who won the millionaire's heart with her kindness and simplicity. She clapped sarcastically. "What a touching story for the gossip magazines. But do you know what happens to little maids who try to rise above their station? They fall, and they fall very, very hard. Aren't we all made of flesh and blood?" Julianne replied calmly. "Rich or poor, in the end, we are all humans seeking happiness." "Cheap philosophy," Vanessa scoffed. "Valerius, get the money." The man approached, keeping the gun pointed as he extended his other hand for the briefcase. Gus reluctantly handed it over. "Now release my son," he demanded. Valerius retreated with the briefcase, placing it on a nearby table to check the contents. Vanessa, however, did not move from Peter's side. Instead, she pulled a small pistol from her jacket pocket. "You know, Gus, I was thinking, why settle for 5 million when I can have everything? With you and the boy out of the way as your ex-fiancé, I can claim a considerable portion of your fortune, especially if I prove I was unjustly defamed and expelled from the mansion." Gus's blood ran cold. It wasn't just a kidnapping for money. It was a deadly trap. "Vanessa, be rational," he tried to argue. "The police are already investigating the kidnapping. If something happens to us, you'll be the prime suspect." She smiled confidently. "I have impeccable alibis for the last 2 days. I was at a spa in Saratoga Springs with dozens of witnesses. As for Valerius, well, unfortunately, he will suffer a tragic accident after the rescue goes wrong." The former partner, who was counting the money, raised his head abruptly. "What? Oh, don't make that surprised face," Vanessa scoffed. "Did you really think I'd split 5 million with you? How naive." In that instant of distraction, Julianne moved subtly, positioning herself better to act. "Star," she whispered discreetly, activating the signal for the police. Vanessa pointed the gun at Peter. "Don't move. 1 step and the boy goes first." "You won't do it," Julianne said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Deep down, you know that crossing that line means never going back." "Don't tell me what I can or cannot do, cleaner," Vanessa screamed, her composure beginning to crack. "You know nothing about me, about what I'm capable of. I know you're too smart to become a murderer," Julianne continued, taking a small step forward. "A fraud, a manipulator, yes, but killing, that requires a different kind of darkness." As Julianne kept Vanessa distracted, Gus noticed subtle movements in the shadows around, the tactical team positioning itself. They needed to buy a few more seconds. "Vanessa, think carefully," he intervened. "You can still get out of here, take the money and disappear. No one needs to get hurt." For a moment, hesitation crossed Vanessa's face. Her finger on the trigger trembled slightly. Valerius, noticing the change in atmosphere, made a sudden move towards the exit with the briefcase. Chaos ensued. Vanessa, startled by the sudden movement, turned the gun towards Valerius. Julianne took advantage of the distraction to throw herself over Peter, shielding him with her body. Gus lunged towards Vanessa. A shot echoed through the warehouse. The bullet hit a metal beam above, ricocheting with a sharp sound. At that exact moment, tactical teams stormed the location from all entrances. Flashes of light shouted orders, the sound of heavy boots running on the concrete. "Police! Everyone on the ground!" Valerius dropped the briefcase, raising his hands. Vanessa, cornered, still held the gun up, her eyes wild, scanning the space, looking for an exit. "It's over, Vanessa," Detective Rachel announced, advancing with her team. "Drop the weapon." For a terrible moment it seemed she would shoot anyway, one last act of desperation. But then slowly she let the pistol fall to the floor. Her beautiful face contorted into a mask of pure hatred as she was restrained and handcuffed. "This isn't over," she hissed at Gus as she was led away. "It never ends." Julianne had already removed Peter's blindfold and restraints. He was trembling violently in her arms. Gus joined them on the floor, forming a protective embrace around his son. "It's over, son. It's really over," he murmured against the boy's hair. "You're safe now." "I knew you would come," Peter sobbed, clinging to both of them as if his life depended on it. "I knew you wouldn't leave me." The detective approached the trio, respecting the moment of reunion. "We need to take them to the hospital to check on the boy's condition. Afterward, we'll need to take formal statements." Gus nodded, lifting Peter into his arms. The boy seemed smaller and more fragile than ever, but he was alive, and that was all that mattered. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that Peter had no serious physical injuries, only mild dehydration and abrasions on his wrists from the restraints. The psychological trauma, however, would require time and specialized support to process. When they were finally discharged, it was already dawn. Mrs. Zelda awaited them at the mansion, having prepared a cozy room for Peter, with his favorite stuffed animals and soft lights to ward off nightmares. "My grandson," she exclaimed upon seeing him, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Thank God you're back with us." Peter smiled weakly, his eyes heavy with sleep and emotional exhaustion. Julianne helped him take a warm bath and put on clean pajamas, while Gus prepared hot chocolate, a ritual the boy had always enjoyed before bed. When Peter finally fell asleep, nestled between Gus and Julianne in his bed, a comforting silence descended upon the room. The adults' hands found each other over the small body that breathed peacefully between them. "Thank you," Gus whispered in the dark. "For everything." "Always," Julianne replied simply. The following months were a period of recovery and rebuilding. Peter began therapy with a child psychologist specializing in trauma, while continuing his physical therapy with renewed determination. Gradually, the nightmares lessened, and his genuine smile returned to light up the house. Vanessa and Valerius were formally charged with kidnapping, extortion, threats, and attempted murder. The evidence was overwhelming. In addition to the testimonies, the police found all the details of the plan on Vanessa's phone, including communications with the mansion intruders months earlier. At the trial, which took place behind closed doors to protect Peter's identity as a minor, both received severe sentences. Vanessa, in particular, remained cold and calculating until the end, showing no remorse for traumatizing a child who had already suffered the loss of his mother. On a spring afternoon, 6 months after the kidnapping, Gus found Julianne in the garden. She was watching Peter play ball with some school friends who had come to visit him. The boy ran freely without crutches, only a slight limp betraying his previous condition. "It's incredible how he recovered," Gus commented, stopping beside her. "Children have a resilience that we adults often lose," Julianne replied, smiling as she watched Peter score a goal and celebrate effusively. Gus took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. In recent months, their relationship had blossomed discreetly, without haste, respecting Peter's healing time and building a solid foundation for the future. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, turning to face her. "About us, about the future." Julianne met his eyes, those same eyes that nearly a year ago had looked at her with suspicion in an office, unjustly accusing her of theft. "And what have you been thinking, Mr. Richmond?" she asked with a slight smile. In response, Gus took a small velvet box from his inside jacket pocket. It wasn't ostentatious or exaggerated. He knew Julianne well enough to know that she valued meaning above appearance. "I thought perhaps it's time we formalized what our hearts have known for a long time," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, yet elegant ring, a single emerald surrounded by small diamonds. "Julianne Sanders, would you do me the honor of marrying me?" Tears glistened in her eyes, reflecting the afternoon sun. "Are you sure? People will talk." "Let them talk," he smiled. "I only care what you, Peter, and our family think. The rest is noise." "Then yes," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "Care 1,000 times yes." As Gus slid the ring onto her finger, Peter noticed the scene from the garden and came running, followed by curious friends. "What's happening?" he asked, his eyes wide as he saw the ring sparkling on Julianne's hand. "Your dad asked me to marry him," she explained, kneeling to be at his height. "And I accepted. But only if you agree too, Peter." The boy looked from her to his father, then at the ring, processing the information. Then, to the adult's surprise, his eyes filled with tears. "Peter." Gus knelt too, worried. "It's okay, son. If you're not ready, it's not that," the boy sobbed, wiping tears with the back of his hands. "It's just, now we're going to be a real family, like I always wanted." Julianne pulled him into a tight hug, unable to hold back her own tears. Gus wrapped his arms around both of them, creating a perfect circle of affection. The wedding took place 3 months later, a simple ceremony in the mansion's gardens. Peter, impeccable in his pageboy suit, led Julianne down the improvised aisle between the chairs. Mrs. Zelda, recovered thanks to the proper treatment she could now receive, cried discreetly in the front row. There was no distinction between brides or groom's guests. They were all simply family friends. Julianne's former colleagues from her cleaning days sat beside executives from Richmond Construction. Josephine, the housekeeper, occupied a place of honor, as the person who had witnessed the entire unfolding of that improbable story. Vows were exchanged at sunset, when the New York City sky rarely was tinged with golden and pink hues. Julianne, in a simple but elegant dress, promised to love and respect not only Gus, but also to honor Eliza's memory and raise Peter with the same love she would dedicate to a biological child. Gus, emotional, thanked fate for having placed that extraordinary woman in his path at the darkest moment of his life, transforming pain into hope, chaos into harmony. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Peter didn't wait for the traditional kiss. He launched himself between the two, hugging them around the waist. The photographer captured the perfect moment, not just the union of a couple, but the rebirth of a family. The party that followed was vibrant and relaxed. Peter, tireless, danced with all the ladies present, proudly showing that his legs now obeyed him perfectly. Gus and Julianne moved among the guests hand in hand, their faces illuminated by a serene happiness that only comes after great trials. At midnight, when most of the guests had left, Julianne found Gus sitting on a secluded bench, contemplating the stars. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sitting beside him. "How life comes full circle," he replied, pulling her into his arms. "A year ago I was lost, empty, just existing. Now—" His voice faltered with emotion. "Now we have a second chance," she completed. "All of us." "I have a surprise for you," Gus commented after a moment of comfortable silence. "I wanted to wait until tomorrow, but I can't keep a secret anymore." He took an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket and handed it to her. Julianne opened it curiously, pulling out some papers. As she read, her eyes widened. "Gus, this is the deed to the house in Mrs. Zelda's name. The apartment where you lived was rented, and she deserves to have her own home safe and adapted to her needs." He smiled, seeing the emotion on his wife's face. "And there's more. I opened a foundation in Peter's name to support children with motor difficulties. I want you to run it if you'd like." Julianne was speechless, just hugging him tightly. How far had she come? From the insecure cleaner who entered that mansion a year ago, to the confident woman who now had the opportunity to multiply the good she had done for Peter. 2 months after the wedding, another surprise. Julianne discovered she was pregnant. The news was met with celebration, especially by Peter, who was overjoyed at the prospect of being an older brother. "I'm going to teach the baby everything," he declared to anyone who would listen. "I'm going to be the best brother in the world." In the 4th month of pregnancy, during a routine visit to the obstetrician, Julianne and Gus received the news that would complete their happiness. They were expecting twins, a girl and a boy, who were already actively moving in their mother's womb. 4, Peter counted on his fingers when he found out. "Now we're a family of 4. Actually 6, Julianne corrected with a smile. "If we count Grandma Zelda and your mum, who will always be watching over us from wherever she is." Peter considered the information seriously, then nodded wisely. "That's true. Mum is always here even when we can't see her." As Julianne's belly grew, the mansion transformed to welcome the new family members. A room was decorated, furniture assembled, clothes organized. In every detail, the love that had grown through adversity now blossomed in fullness. On the eve of the twins' birth, Peter woke in the middle of the night and went to the couple's room, where he found Julianne awake, caressing her huge belly. "Can't sleep?" he asked, climbing into bed and lying beside her. "Your siblings are restless today," she smiled. "I think they're eager to meet the world, and to meet me," Peter added importantly. "After all, I'm the older brother." Julianne chuckled softly, running her fingers through the boy's hair. "You know what I admire most about you, Peter? Your capacity to love. After everything you've been through, your heart remains open, generous. I learned from you." "Mum," he replied naturally, using for the first time the term that had been on his lips for months. Julianne's eyes filled with tears. Drawn by the sudden silence, Peter looked up, concerned. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, my love," she whispered, hugging him. "You said exactly the right thing at the right time." Gus, who had been watching silently from the doorway, joined them in bed, completing the family circle that would soon expand. The next morning, Julianne went into labor. After hours of effort, the twins were born healthy and strong. First the girl, named Eliza in honor of Peter's first mother, followed by the boy named Paul, in memory of Julianne's father. When Peter entered the hospital room and saw the babies in his parents' arms, his face lit up with a smile so radiant it seemed capable of dispelling any shadow of the past. "Hello, little brother," Gus said, adjusting little Paul in his arms so Peter could see him better. "Come meet your siblings." The boy approached with reverence, his eyes wide with admiration. He delicately touched each baby's tiny hand, marveling as small fingers instinctively closed around his own. "They're so small," he murmured, enchanted. "But they'll grow fast," Julianne smiled, exhausted but radiant. "And they'll need an older brother to teach them everything about the world." Peter nodded solemnly, accepting the responsibility with the seriousness that only a child who had matured through adversity could demonstrate. That afternoon, while the babies slept and Peter watched over them with sentinel dedication, Gus and Julianne exchanged a look that contained their entire journey, from the first tense encounter in a grieving boy's room to that moment of family fullness. It had not been an easy path. There had been betrayals, unjust accusations, invasions, kidnapping, moments of absolute terror, but there had also been healing, growth, revelations of inner strength that neither of them knew they possessed. And at the center of it all, there had been love, not the idealized romantic love of soap operas, but real, imperfect love, built day by day through choices, persistence, and the courage to protect those one loves even when it demands sacrifice. Outside the hospital window, New York City continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the small story of redemption unfolding in one of its countless rooms. But for that newly expanded family, the entire universe seemed contained in that space, past, present and future intertwined in a silent promise that, no matter what came, they would face it together. Because in the end, as Peter had wisely observed months earlier, they were a real family now. And that made all the difference. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Julianne, Gus and Peter's journey has touched your hearts. This story reminds us that, even in the darkest moments, love and courage can illuminate our path and transform lives. To follow more emotional stories like this, we have prepared a special playlist with narratives that explore the strength of family bonds and overcoming adversity. Find it here by clicking to your left. If this American story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that show the beauty and complexity of life in different cultures. Let us know in the comments which character touched your soul the most, and share your own experiences of overcoming and love with us. Until the next story.